Right, so thank you everyone. I am absolutely mindful that as we spend this 90 minutes together, that we are in a country in crisis, and that there are a number of people this morning who said to me that they wouldn't be able to attend, mainly those that are living in KZN, because they may be in a food queue or helping out or doing something different. And so I really want us to just realize that even though we're here, that we're very mindful of what's happening in the country. And as a team at 50 Plus, we made the decision this morning to link with TAFTA, who are a big organization looking after the elderly in Durban and the surrounding area, and to find ways in which we collectively as a community of people over 50 can help them to support those that are the most vulnerable and the most in crisis right now. In the middle of a Mandela week, when we want to focus on the good, we really need to now make sure that we are making a difference as well. And so I will, after this meeting, send everybody an email with the recording and with a link to an article we wrote this morning about how you can go about being involved and just through your own influence, supporting others to be able to help those that at the moment are struggling with supplies in whatever way it may be. And we're going to have to be creative in the ways in which we really do find that, because the supplies may not be in Durban. And so we're going to have to find them elsewhere to get them to where they need to be. But it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker. So Nikki is firstly a friend. We've been friends for more than 20 years. We were work colleagues. We've worked in and out of different organizations together, traveled around the country, been on the speaking platform, and actually we're together at the World Trade Center scenario. And so there are these memories that I have of Nikki that come in and out of my mind. And so other than being a really good friend over the last 20 years, a international speaker and author with her 5th book just being released. So Nikki, over to you to talk to us about reigniting your sense of playfulness and curiosity at this age. Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you very much, Linda, and it's wonderful to be with you. Yes, we really have walked a journey, and it's been an absolute privilege every step of the way. But I'd like to kick off by saying, when you invited me to join this lovely panel of speakers, it kind of hit me that I am over 50 and I actually really belong in this room, not just as a speaker, but as a member. And I am that second half of life, just like every single one of our audience members is in the second half of their lives. So it kind of was that wake up call. And during this global pandemic and obviously the unrest that is spreading around our country and making us feel very uncomfortable, I'm actually quite happy to be in the age group that I'm in. That's been something during COVID that has been kind of, it's really hit home that I'm glad I'm not a 20-something starting out afresh, because I think when we're the AR on the other side of 50, we have the benefit of years of experience. So these are things to acknowledge and celebrate. There's so much negativity around aging, but I think right now there's a lot to celebrate. So having the benefit of years of experience, having built a network of contacts socially and professionally over the years, and I think never forget all the skills that you've built up that can be useful over time. And when we talk about going through a tough time now, look at times where you have overcome in your life, where you've been resilient, because those are experiences and skills that you need to bring to the fore right now. I've lived through ups and downs of life, and I know that no one's life unfolds in a straight line, not ever. There are always twists and turns in the road. So let's celebrate the second half of our lives. And I've also lived for long enough to know that attitude is key. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're all here today, despite the fact that we're living in very uncertain and disruptive times, is to feed the right attitude. And I've learned that attitude is key to succeed at anything or to survive and thrive through anything. So I've been a wife and a mother, and I have had 3 different but linked careers, which you may all know or not know about. So I actually started in public relations and then got into direct selling, which is where I met Linda. And then I became the speaker and author 15 years ago. I've also been a gluten-free eater for 27 years, long before it became a thing. And I have blown 3 discs in my lower back and avoided a spinal fusion. That was in my early 30s. In my 40s, I ruptured a disc in my neck, and I now have a titanium disc replacement. And then at the end of 2017, we were attacked in our home, and my husband was tragically murdered. So I'm sure that many of you who've lived for 50 plus years or more have your own stories of opportunities and obstacles that have either got in your way or have catapulted you forward in your lifetime, or maybe even threatened to derail you. So we've all got our stories, but I wonder what attitude you have chosen that has helped you to get up again and to thrive and grow. And when I analyze the driving force that's kept me going through life, I think it really has been curiosity and determination that has fueled and underpinned my resilience. You know, people often say, now, how do you keep getting up and fighting again? But for me, it really is about being curious. So let's take a look at curiosity. Where does this drive actually come from? And I want you to think to babies. Babies, what drives them to touch their toes, to lift their heads, to roll over, to crawl, to stand, to walk? And it's really the curiosity to see what's behind the couch, what's around the corner, and what impact can they have on the world. And I don't think it's any different for adults at all. In fact, if we can be intensely curious beyond needing to fuel our sense of control about our lives, which right now, let's face it, we're desperately wanting to feel a sense of control. But we actually deal better with the unexpected and with transitions when we move through our lives if we have a sense of curiosity. Because if there's one thing that I learned through my husband's death, control is actually an illusion. We think we're in control, but actually we aren't. All we really control is our attitude in every given moment and our choices minute by minute. So I do believe that transitions and life stages are a form of disruption, and they can upend our very carefully planned reality and our picture of how life should feel or be. And for some reason, learning and growth really seems to happen largely at the feet of pain, disappointment, and frustration. I'm sure that all of you that's resonating for all of you right now. I mean, I wish learning wasn't quite so hard, but for some reason, this is how human beings, evolve. If we get caught, however, in the mindset of being a victim of circumstance, that's where you really can get buried and stuck. And actually what that means is that you're getting stuck in your past. And when we get stuck and frozen in our past, it's very difficult to move forward. So if we can allow our curiosity to be stronger than our fear, and I want to say that again, allow your curiosity to be stronger than your fear, then we open up the door to new opportunities and possibilities that we never knew were there before. And just before we started on this webinar, we were just saying how there are unusual alliances taking place in our country over this time. You know, groups of people coming together who you had never thought would come together in solidarity before. So, that's one of the things that can happen. So what am I suggesting? That you actually allow yourself to be broken open rather than being broken by what life throws at you. And to harness the curiosity and playfulness of the child within. We're living in such a disruptive time at the moment. We need to be coming from a place of not knowing and no right answers. We're coming from a place of not knowing and no right answers, because we have never been here before. Not one of us has been in this very situation where we find ourselves at the moment. So curiosity and playfulness is important. And playfulness, I believe, is actually an attitude. Playing with options, playing with ideas, exercising our power to choose. So let's think about toys and games for a second. Think of a box of random Lego pieces. We have options. We can choose how and what we're going to build. Then think of a game like Monopoly, a more structured game that has rules. The dice will fall however they fall, but there's always a choice in whether to throw the dice or to play a card, or whether to buy a property or not. There are choices as we move around the board, just as there are choices as we move through life. So please don't forget to play games, no matter how old you are. My granny lived to 93 and was still playing bridge and mahjong. She was as sharp as a pin. And I think that the attitude, the act of play, and the attitude of playfulness can bring so much joy and fun and connection in your life, whether you're playing games with friends or with your family and your grandchildren. It's another language. Play is a language all of its own that actually transcends words. And sometimes words are not enough, and we need to connect in a different way. And then the final point that I want to mention, and I think this is very, very important at this time of social distance and isolation, is the need to fill your mind with lots of different visual imagery. And it's called stocking the pond and filling the well. Now, this was something that I started working on myself, and then I picked up The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which I've had on my bookshelf for years and read about 20 years ago. And I just opened it up at the same time as I was thinking how being trapped in the four walls of an office and behind the screen during COVID is making me feel depleted. And Julia Cameron talks about stocking the pond and filling the well. And I think it's just such a beautiful line to use. And it's about pumping your well full of rich visual imagery, because if you don't, your well will start to run dry. And I actually took matters into my own hands in April. Because the thing is that for good creative problem solving and critical thinking and creativity, we actually need a lot of visual imagery, or from as and when required. So my yearning was so great, and my gut feel was so clear on this, that I needed to go and fill my well and stock my pond, that I chose in April to drive to Cape Town instead of flying to attend a virtual convention. And that was quite drastic, I guess, to drive 1,200 kilometers to stock my pond and fill my well. But what I really wanted was to see the changing scenery going past as we drove the 1,200 kilometers. And your brain is taking photographs every second, every millisecond. And I also stopped and took a lot of photographs along the way. So, moving through the flat Karoo into the mountains of the Cape, that was all of what I needed to fill my own cup. And I was feeling, I guess, maybe quite depleted, because I'd also just finished writing my new book, which appeared on the shelves on Friday. So that's Future Proof Yourself. And I wrote that in January. And when you finish a big project like that, sometimes you feel quite empty. Almost, I call it popped elastic band syndrome. When you've been working under so much pressure and suddenly there isn't that pressure anymore, and it goes like pop, and you kind of feel like a limp rag for a while. I'm sure many of you can understand this concept. Anyway, so that was my extreme response to needing to stock my pond and fill my well and fill my cup. But I want to share with you two other things that I did that really were restorative, because if I asked you right now if you are feeling fatigued or depleted, I will guarantee you, because I've done this exercise with many groups, that you would say that you're feeling depleted. And when you're depleted, no amount of rest can fill your cup. You have to actively do restorative activities. And my drive to Cape Town was restorative for me. Gardening, re-landscaping a patch of the garden is restorative. And here's 2 other things that I did, and you can do this too. So I went on an artist's date with a friend. We'd been talking about going to the Leonardo Hotel in Sandton, the 54-story hotel, the biggest, tallest building in Sandton, because there are 1,000 pieces of art in that hotel. Some of the biggest installations are in the public areas, in the lobby and the entertainment areas and the restaurants, so open to viewing by the public. We actually did an art tour that cost us 200 Rand for the hour, but it was really well worth doing. And just to think that there's all this creativity and playfulness within our local artist community, just absolutely fantastic. So it pushes, art pushes buttons for you. You either hate it, you love it, and don't judge it. But it agitates your brain, and that's what we need right now. So you can go and do that if you live in Joburg, absolutely available to you, or go and find any art gallery. You don't even have to like the art. And then the other thing I did, which I've never done, and I've lived in Joburg for 30 plus years, was that I went to Nirox in the Cradle. Now, it's 30 hectares of magnificent garden, but it's a sculpture garden, and there are some incredible, huge sculptures that are in that garden, and every now and again they have public events. So just get onto Facebook and go and have a look when they're next going to do something. But if you ever have the opportunity to get into those wide open spaces with waterways and ponds and dams, and just somebody who has vision, to share in other people's vision is sometimes so inspiring. And it just triggers that curiosity and that playfulness that I've been talking about. And many people talked about just going to Delta Park in April when the cosmos was in full bloom and was taller than a human being, and just saying that was the first time they'd got out of their houses since the beginning of lockdown, and what a beautiful image it left for them, and an experience. So when we transition through life stages, we really are called to reinvent, to rediscover, to reignite, and to recreate. And I say this on the back of having walked through what I call the Shadowlands for the last 3 and a bit years since my husband's murder. And for me, the invitation that has been beckoning to me is, who is Nikki without Simon? And that has been the adventure and the call that I have been following for the last 3 years. And it's a really interesting adventure. Not always fun, not always pleasant, terrifying at times, but unbelievably exciting and exhilarating at others. So to end off, when you are moving through these transitions, when you're living through a crisis, when we are living through disruption, please do so as playfully as you can, with greater awareness every day as you navigate this change. And my wish for you is this: may your curiosity always be way greater than your fear. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful sentence, Nikki, because you really are helping us in this time to really step out and do that. And just for those that might be interested, for my 60th birthday, from my children, Julia Cameron had written a new book called It's Never Too Late to Start Again, which literally is a book in season for when she turns 60. So yes, I agree. She has some wonderful creative ways of helping us to unlock who we are, because sometimes we're stuck. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this event specifically today, is because reinvention and recreation is something we're needing to do in a longer life of who we are. So thanks, Nikki. We really appreciate you. And right, Carine, now it's over to you. If you can take yourself off mute, Carine, and you can share your screen. Carine is a friend from Hartbeespoort Dam when I lived there, an avid philanthropist and walker. And over to you, Carine, to share your journey on mindfulness in nature.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just getting my timer on. Okay, thank you so much, Linda. Thank you, Linda and Jenny, for the opportunity and this invitation to actually share my journey of recreation, and specifically in mindfulness, and even more specifically in nature. So how my journey began, I was born and grew up in Belgium for the first 6 years of my life. And I distinctly remember waving to my grandparents in Calais with many other families and beginning our long sea journey on the Queen Mary to South Africa. And this was in 1964. And this photograph, which I found just haphazardly, must have been one of the very first encounters of nature that I ever came across. And judging from the car and the clothing, we were obviously not quite prepared for these wide open African spaces. My mother, unfortunately, never adapted to Africa and returned back to Belgium. And I remained with my father, and on very unusual circumstances, but one that I'm forever grateful for. And this is where my sense of adventure, independence, and the outdoors began. After schooling and studies and a brief work experience of 2 years, I left South Africa and traveled for 3.5 years, hiking and working in the States, in Europe, and the UK. And it was a time of meeting different people and all walks of life, experiencing different cultures. But I think the University of Life taught me a great deal about myself and the importance of trusting and having respect for others' beliefs, but more importantly, with really just going with the flow. And eventually coming back to South Africa with my travel partner, got married and settled down and had 2 wonderful children, during which I began my corporate and banking career. It was in my 40s and my 50s that the universe decided to throw a curveball. And I think it was the fast lane, the hectic corporate environment, huge stress really took its toll, unfortunately, to a failed marriage and some very unhealthy lifestyles. My mental as well as my physical health started deteriorating quite quickly. And I do believe that this is not necessarily a sign of midlife crisis, but it was actually a time of unraveling. An unraveling just to kind of get me on the right track again. So once the children were out of home, I was able to begin my own discovery of self-help and spirituality. And over the past few years, have had the honor and the opportunity of hosting a few groups of ladies to Nepal, to India, and quite recently, in the last 2-3 years, 2 caminos in Portugal and Spain. And I've always said that as long as my body at this age of 61 is fit and healthy enough, I will carry on doing what I can and hopefully be able to share in the benefits and the practices of mindfulness at the same time. So what does walking mean to me? Walking allows us to shift from merely observing to actively engaging with nature, encountering our sacred place and deepening our connection with the environment. By walking the Camino specifically, we become part of a community. We follow in the footsteps of pilgrims, seekers, and explorers. And walking in nature brings us back to our roots. I believe our nervous system are more used to us dealing with physical threats, especially in the big 5 country, than they are actually sitting in a traffic jam or sitting in front of an email or working through deadlines. So let's begin with the definition of mindfulness. This comes to us from Dr. Jan Kabat-Zinn, a professor and a creator of the Stress Reduction Clinic and Center for Mindfulness in Medicine and Healthcare in Massachusetts, USA. And mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, and in the present moment, with the attitude of non-judgment, which therefore means bringing curiosity in, non-reactively versus responsively, and as open-hearted with acceptance as possible. The meaning of mindfulness to me, it's about maintaining a moment-by-moment awareness of our thoughts, emotions, bodily sensations, and surrounding environment. It has a variety of research-backed benefits, including reduction in stress, improvement in everyday life satisfaction, emotional regulation, and a greater focus and attention in day-to-day activity. I did my first backpacking walk, in fact, September last year, and for me, it brought mindfulness so much into play. The creation of that sense of awareness in a new environment, especially while walking in Big Five country, especially through the practice of the anchoring breath of mindfulness. We are so lucky to be breathing. So watching the breath is actually a blessing. Our minds don't want to stay with one thing, like watching the breath, maybe because we're so used to surrounding ourselves with constant stimulation. There is often a need to step out of our stories and fabrications and just be. And breath work is very much an integral part of these mindfulness walks. And it leads into meditation and staying centered. Moving forward with the beginner's mind, becoming totally aware of how we react to certain situations, especially when we're in Big Five country, coming across a herd of elephants or anything similar, we're moving out of that autopilot and into that mindful way. And moving with this level of awareness, we fully feel alive and present. The importance of the digital detox, I think, is a huge thing, especially whilst walking. We experience what it's like not to multitask. And I think just unplugging ourselves from the day-to-day activity. It's a way of letting go of expectations and remaining as much in the moment as you can. Whilst walking, we have the opportunity of bringing an issue or a problem to mind and letting go of trying to solve it. Literally by breathing and watching what arises and trusting the process. This helps us relax and think more clearly. Being in nature can restore our mood, give us back our energy and vitality, which refreshes and rejuvenates us. Our focus determines our reality. Observing your thoughts, you're actually not your thoughts. The mind is like the blue sky, with the clouds as your thoughts and your emotions, and let them come and go. The sun of awareness is always shining. Is it possible to rewire our brain? Hibb's law says we can. Neurons that fire together, wire together. So what we practice grows stronger. Scientists have found that regular mindful practice can promote positive change in the brain pathways. Look at where you have your best ideas. Where are you? Normally either in the bath or when you wake up first thing in the morning, or possibly even on a walk. And this is due to our brain waves moving into different states. Are we fully alive and present? What type of internal dialogue is going on while we walk? What does our emotional landscape actually look like? Are we taking the time to check in with ourselves? And during these works, it's one of our biggest regular practices is to check in. And out of 10, how are you feeling right now? How distracted are you? According to the science of Gloria Mark, we are distracted on average 2 hours a day, and 47% of that is our own internal distractions. And then it takes us all that much longer just to get back to our initial task. Be aware of your sight, smell, sounds, and touch. And this happens obviously with a walk especially. So you label what comes in while you're walking, and that actually does tend to get you out of that autopilot mode. We're creating more space for yourself. And how do you treat yourself? What is the most important thing in life? For me, it's my health. Without it, I cannot love my God or my family. There is a sacred exchange that allows the flow of nature to bath you to good health, and everything in nature is connected. We form part of nature, be it swimming in a river or sleeping under the stars. Natural environments have been found to have a positive effect on our amygdala, which is the part of the brain that plays a key role in processing of emotions. Working with the 3 attitudes, we work through the non-judgmentally, which I can relate to coming across a termite mound. We have no idea what is going on inside of that mound because of what we're seeing on the outside. What could be behind their behavior? And I believe ill will and compassion cannot live in the human mind at the same time. Non-reactively, there's a lovely quote from Dr. Viktor Frankl that talks about between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies my freedom to choose my response. And my response leads me to growth and freedom. It's from the book Man's Search for Meaning. The open-heartedness comes automatically with love and compassion. On our walks, we all help each other with our backpacks. We help each other with setting up camp. And we have our only possessions on our backs. And I think walking a Camino or walking through the bush, you realize that is really all you're needing. So taking care of your mental health for me is as important as taking care of your body. And the self-care rituals are practical ways to help you focus during these challenging times. This emphasis is inner calm benefits greatly from living closer to nature and in capturing the profound intelligence of our natural world. It always vibrates with beautiful energy and it never dies. So these are some of the offers that I can do. We have the backpacking trails through the Greater Kruger Park. We have, for those that are maybe not as fit, we have a catered tented trail in the Timbavati. We have mindfulness retreats in a private lodge at Mabula Game Reserve. And obviously Caminos. I hope to be doing a solo of the full Camino in the next year or 2. And some of the daily highlights that we would include would be sunrise and sunset stretches, which combine Tai Chi and yoga. We have private game reserve drives at Mabula specifically. Downtime practices, a lot of time for journaling, checking in and discussions on self-care. On the backpacking trail, we in fact do a sleep out under the stars. A lot of meditation work and moments in nature. Ample downtime to read and snooze and lounge about the camp. And allowing yourself the time for your own journey of self-love. So I'd like to thank you. Thank you for the opportunity of allowing me to share my journey, and with the hope of sharing the actual experiences with you in the very near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carine. That was absolutely wonderful. And it's lovely that they're just kind of flowing together, which is absolutely. So right, as we start to come back in, it's going to be difficult to get feedback from every room as a result of time. But I would love for you to share in the chat box some reflections or comments from your conversation. In that way, we get to capture the thoughts from the different rooms. But I know that it's an important part of the process is to just spend some time thinking through what it is that you know we and to step back and to think about it. So please share with us in the chat box. We really would appreciate that. So now I'm going to hand over to Niven, who I see is very efficient and has her presentation up already. So Niven and I have known one another for about 20 years, and through a number of interests that we both have. Firstly, when she was the CEO of the Professional and Business Women's Association in South Africa, and then in our passion through the early childhood phase, and she's still a board member at Cotlands right now, and then at Gibbs, where she has lectured and as a leader in business and now in her own consultancy. Niven, it really is a privilege to have you with us today. And so over to you to talk about It's Not About the Camper Van.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. So what prompted Linda's invitation to me was quite an interesting thing that we did. And when I say we, I speak about my partner and myself in February this year. So in our breakout room, I was saying that every opportunity that we had to travel when we could, and the restrictions were lifted, we just grabbed. And one of the things that we did in February was to hire a camper van and to essentially spend, let's see what's going on here, essentially spend a whole bunch of weeks traversing 5,000 kilometers around South Africa. And like I said, we do travel a lot, but this was to some places we hadn't yet seen, with a mode of transport that we'd only ever followed overseas. So we've hired camper vans overseas, but never done it in our own country. And it was just the most fabulous experience of places and people and getting stuck in mud and getting out of it, until we eventually got back to Joburg and thought, okay, well, that was over. And I posted at one point in the trip a photograph of the camper van in a place, it was just outside Uppington, in this beautiful caravan park that we'd found on the banks of the river, because in February, you may remember, those of you who are South African, the roads and the rivers were just full of water. And so Grabi's Falls were unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. And the Orange River was practically bursting its banks. And so I posted this picture of the camper van next to the Orange River and me having a gin and tonic, and labeled it, today's global headquarters of Niven Postma Inc. And it got the most phenomenal response. And it was just a random posting. I'm not massively active on social media, and certainly on LinkedIn, I keep things professional. But I just saw incredible responses, and the number of people who were reacting to this post, and then the number of comments that were saying, gosh, one day I want to do that. One day I'm going to do that. And so Linda saw what I was seeing, having also commented on it herself. And she then reached out to me and she said, are you as interested as I am in all these responses? And all these people saying that they're going to do this one day, and really wondering, why don't you just do it? And so she said, would you like to come talk about it today? And I was really thinking about, well, what would I talk about? Because if it's about the camper van, it's simple. Google, hire one, get on the road, and post some pictures. This is not splitting the atom stuff, guys. This is quite straightforward. And so then I thought, well, clearly it's not about the camper van, because otherwise people would be doing it. So what is it about? And Jennifer Garvey-Berger, who's a leadership writer whose stuff I really love, speaks about the 5 mind traps that we all have when faced with complexity. And it's a fabulous book and fabulous research that she does, and very compelling. And I thought, well, if it's not about the camper van, well, then it's actually more about the mind traps that we all face when it comes to possibility. And so the first mind trap I thought about was what Daniel Gilbert, who's a Harvard psychologist, talks about. He's got a great TED talk, and he talks about this bias that we all have to thinking that who we are now is who we are forever. So that we're complete now. We're finished, and this is the final version of who we are. And you would think, okay, well, the now maybe happens in middle age or late middle age, or no. Fascinatingly, we've got this bias our whole flipping life. Ask us in our 20s, do we foresee much change? No, this is pretty much who I am. Yes, I've changed a lot in the last 10 years, hugely. I mean, you must see who I was at school and who I am now. No, but I reckon this is the finished product. Ask us in our 30s. And so it carries on for the rest of our lives. And so it's just fascinating to think that this bias, this fallacy that we all operate under, we're all works in progress constantly. And yet we are always thinking we're complete. And so, what that fixed mindset around our identity and around possibility gives us and also takes away from us. I also thought, gosh, we don't really have many rituals and transitions after a certain age. Yes, I mean, the big milestones of your 40s and your 50s and your 40th and your 50th birthday, maybe. But if I think about my life, the big rituals of being born and the bookends of life, and I mean, Nikki, didn't you speak poignantly about the bookend of your husband's life and death, and we mark these things, and we mark when our children walk, and we mark when you become a teenager, and we mark transition into manhood in this country, and all kinds of rituals. And then suddenly you get to your 30s and your 40s and there's no big rituals. It's like, well, just live your life, because all the big things apparently seem to have gone in terms of the rituals that we need to mark. And I was reminded of that a few years ago, or struck by that a few years ago, when a friend of mine from Varsity's lovely mother, her marriage ended after 40 odd years, and quite devastatingly. And bless her, this very dignified, quiet woman said, okay, this is it. In this house that I've had in Pretoria my whole life with my husband that I thought I would be married to for my whole life, we had a house warming party when we moved in here. And now I'm divorced, but I'm going to have a house cooling party. And with all the dignity and joy that I can muster in the face of a collapsed marriage, I'm going to cool this house and say goodbye to it. And I'm going to mark it. And it's going to be a ritual and a transition. And so this is why we took the camper van trip in February. My partner had been at R&B for 13 years. And I'm always fascinated by these people who leave a job on a Friday and start a new job on a Monday. I mean, surely this is something you should acknowledge. I'm leaving after 13 years. I need to exhale before I inhale and start this new role, this new identity, and all of these things. And we don't tend to think about that very often. And so I think these rituals and transitions are things we need to mark and should mark. And then the third mind trap was, I read something so lovely the other day. And I'm finding, I don't know about you, but I'm finding as I get older, the things that really move me and move me sometimes to tears are not the hideous, horrendous things of which we're seeing plenty at the moment. But it's the things of beauty, and it's the things of kindness, and it's the things of unexpected, just loveliness in people and in the world. And this meme that I saw, I think really spoke to me about that. And it said, so, I speak about the rituals and the transitions and the big things. And of course, those things matter. And I think we should look at them and we should mark them and honor them. But this meme said, we think it's the big moments that define our lives. The wedding, the baby, the new house, the dream job. But really, these big moments of happiness are just punctuation marks. The narrative of our lives is written every day in the small and the simple. And gosh, I mean, I'm holding on to that at the moment. I have a beautiful plate in my kitchen that says bake, because murder is wrong. And have I been baking up a storm? Malva pudding, rusks, chocolate cake, that's my great-great-grand's recipe. The most fantastic fruit cake. But think dark chocolate, figs, hazelnuts. I mean, it is out of this world. And then you have it with a little bit of creme fraiche. And I'm making that and chicken soup. And I'm just dropping these off to friends who are having a difficult time, family who've got COVID. And I dropped them off this weekend to my godfather, who's clearly known me my whole life. And I looked at this lovely man whose wife's very sick with COVID. And I could just see the tears come right here when I brought in some chicken soup and some rusks and a bunch of flowers and a getaway magazine so he can plan where they're going to go when all of this is over. And I think, my Uncle Dave has been there for the big events, my 40th, my 21st. But this narrative of standing in his driveway and just giving him some soup, those narratives, I think, are playing out in all kinds of ways. I think that the next thing was, I really wrestled for a long time around this idea of good excuses, bad reasons. And, you know, the really good excuses we give to other people for why we can or can't do something, as opposed to really looking at them from our own perspective and asking ourselves, is it a good excuse or is it a bad reason? And I mean, I'm certainly not here to judge other people's reasons or excuses and to decide what they are. But I think, you know, when it comes to the idea of possibility and how we might do things and the things that we might do, how many things we put out there to other people instead of ask of ourselves. And so one of the classic ones, I suppose, is children. I can't possibly, because, you know, I've got kids and I've got to take care of them. And I mean, again, who am I to argue with that? But I was struck the other day, I was reading The U, and before anybody judges me, I think The U is fantastic. Okay, it's a chronicle of South African life, and I will read it along with the New Yorker and the Economist and the Harvard Business Review loudly and proudly. And in the story about 2-3 weeks ago, this family, a South African family, have 2 kids, and the one child is disabled, seriously disabled. And I thought, gosh, how fascinating, because they've used the reason of their child's disability as an impetus to travel the world, as opposed to an excuse not to. This child needs to see the world and we need to have fun, so we're going to take her. And so, you know, excuses that sound fabulous and are fabulous, very strong, are they reasons? And only we can answer that. And the second last one was this idea of, I love it when people say, don't be scared of failure. I mean, do me a favor. Yeah, let me just undo millions of years of conditioning. Of course I'm going to be scared of failure. I mean, how can I not be? And so I think strongly it's not about telling people to not be scared of failure, because it's physically impossible and emotionally insurmountable to not fear failure. But isn't it more about being terrified of regret? And so if I'm truly terrified of regret, my fear of failure kind of fades relatively to some degree of insignificance in the face of fear of regret. And I suppose the last one is one I have had unconsciously, I suppose, my whole life, because like Carine, I did a lot of backpacking. So I was 17 and then backpacked for 4 years and really relied on the kindness of strangers in all kinds of places. And I remember closing my UK bank account with Abbey National Building Society to get my last pound, because I needed that pound really badly and I did not need a bank account. And so I suppose I've unconsciously always thought about life like this, but I very consciously thought about it when I had cancer a few years ago, and I read a quote that said, we all have 2 lives. And the second starts the moment we truly understand. We've only got one. And I think my biggest fear has always been, let me not understand that the day before I died, the month before. Let my second life not start just when it's too late. And so I think, you know, these were some of the thoughts that ran through my mind as I looked at these comments, as I looked at my own things that I am driven to do and the things that I can't not do. And to the extent in this truly devastating time that we're in, even more so, you know, the need for possibility, the promise of possibility, I think has to sustain us. So from me, thanks.
Thank you so much for your wise words, Niven, and for sharing. It's just been so fabulous how the different talks have pull together into a theme for such a time as this. So we really do appreciate you. So Sandy, if you can take yourself off mute, Sandy and I are going to have a conversation about life and nurturing and a whole bunch of things. But Sandy and I have known one another all our lives because our mothers were friends. And so we grew up in the same community in Rustenburg, them on a farm, us in the town. But our mothers and our mothers' families had been long-term residents for a number of generations in Rustenburg. And Margaret Roberts was Sandy's mom. And so, Sandy, what do you feel about this long connection that we have?
I just love it. I think we all are going back to our roots, and I think we're feeling very nurtured. I love the idea that we can go back and we pick up as if our parents were, having a conversation in the room, and we grew up with these lovely conversations. And our grandparents, and I think, earlier on we spoke about the Transvaal Union that used to have the oranges, and I found my grandmother's recipe book that was, I found it recently, which was actually given to me when she passed on from her cook, who walked from the bottom house where she used to live in the old farm, and he had it on his head wrapped up in a tea towel with string that he had wrapped up, he'd always done the Christmas put in that, and he'd wrapped it up to give it to me as a gift to pass on for the next generation. And I've been looking at those with new eyes. I'd forgotten about it until I decided to go back, and specifically in this time, and it's amazing that we've connected, that you've been able to put all this together. In this time, everybody's looking at those important things that made us who we are. And I bless you for that. Thank you, Linda.
Pleasure.
It's wonderful.
I think our mothers would be smiling down from heaven right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we
shared the other day when we chatted about the memories of Margaret Roberts. Even though she was a physiotherapist, she was always a naturalist, and my mother was a pharmacist. And so they were at both spectrums of the medical kind of spectrum. And I loved going out to the farm and to spend time with you in that beautiful kitchen out at the farm, out at Hartbeespoort Dam, and all the wonderful recipes and just the legacy. And for me, that's why I wanted to have this conversation at a time like this, because, you bring regeneration of natural and legacy through this process. So share a little bit of your thoughts on that.
Well, I think just to go back, just to give everybody a little bit of a foundation, and I'm so pleased that we can talk to these amazing ladies, because you each have so much that I feel inside myself deeply. I think going back to the natural is going to be the most important factor as we look at South Africa today. It is going to be what we've grown up with, those beautiful gardens that we've always grown up with, but it's going to be the sustainability that we're going to require, and we're going to have to pull on those resources and keep our families together and keep healthy and keep positive. And specifically coming from the background that I have with the plants and the food and the growing of the plants and so on, it wasn't as if I was just dumped in it. I've been part of the Herbal Centre for 37 years, 38 years this year. This is the 5th year without mom, and it's been an incredible journey. Grief is one thing, but when you're dealing with people of the land, and you're dealing with fires, and you have all the natural causes that come into it, and then you're a mom on top of that, and you've got to put on the other hat and be mom, and forget about what you're going through and be the mom that supplies the healthy food and looks after the tears and all the things that the children are going through. You start juggling as our parents did. And I think the foundation of herbs has been amazing for me. But not only that, I think that in each one of our lives we gravitate to the go-to that makes us happiest. And it inevitably involves some part of nature, whether it's gardening or walking. Carine was, talking about walking, and you know, those journeys that we take to find that wow factor in our lives. It gives us the passion that drives us, that is the part of determination that makes us, I think, is the most important. But from where I sit on the farm, and sometimes I feel like I'm bushwhacked because I'm only seeing what I'm seeing right in front of me, I am so grateful for what it offers me in just the natural healing. And I think this is what we're going to be looking at going forward. I don't know how you feel about it, but I think 50 plus is not what it used to be in the old days. We are really outsourcing ourselves to look for something that actually is deep within us, that we know is there, but we're not quite sure which way to go. And I think the memories of our past are those that keep us together, and this connectivity to amazing women.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So do you want to maybe just share 2 or 3 plants that come to mind in simplifying our lives? So a potted garden or a small garden. So what is it that I remember very clearly the day your mom arrived at my mother's home with this plant and said, Dot, this has to go in your garden because you can do this with it and that with it. And yeah, those are the things we remember, because that was your mother. So share with us 2 or 3 of those that we need right now.
Well, I've been thinking about how we're going to be going forward with this food crisis in a huge way. And my mum and I spoke about this many years ago, because it's been coming. And it hits us in different ways of which crisis we actually have had. If it's either a natural crisis, which many of us have survived, or if it's been what we're going through, a political crisis, or if we're somewhere in the world where we don't have. Mum was writing her updated version, and I'll show you what it was, and I completed this book with her. It is, I don't know if you can see it, Indigenous Healing Plants. It's there. It is quite an amazing book that has got a lot of South Africans' healing plants. We have the most beautiful, diverse plants in the whole world, and we're this tiny little country. We can live sustainably off the Indigenous healing plants, and some of those that are very, very important to me are the natural amaranth, which I'm going to show you a picture of. Can you see that? This one. It grows out in the veld. It is a maroch. It is something every one of us should be picking. The seeds are like poppy seeds. They spread very easily. I put a black plastic bag over the fronds that dip down. You'll recognize them driving past the veld as you drive on the main roads. Bright red in color. If you put a black plastic bag over those seeds and shake it prolifically, you'll be left with handfuls of, just from one plant, of these beautiful beady-eyed tiny little black pinheads, which are the seeds. And just spreading those onto a little bit of cotton wool onto your windowsill and allowing them to grow, within a week or 2, you should have an inch-high baby maroch that would give you the best energy, the most iron, and of course, all that nutrition. So just looking at the amaranths, and thereafter looking at the common blackjack. And interestingly, I mean, there's so many different plants I could talk about, but the common blackjack is one of those plants that creates mucus in the body, which we should all be getting rid of in these times. Every time we go into a cold spell, we should be having a few of the very soft, I'm not talking about the seed, I'm talking about the small, probably about hand size height, without its seed, the very soft leaves in our soups and in our maybe even put it into a tea if you can, if you're doing a herb tea, to get it into your body. No more than 3 days of tea, you just need it once a day to create the phlegm to get going out of your body, so that our lungs are clear going through COVID, and that we don't have that phlegm base where our bodies are not feeling 100%. I had a huge thing where a lot of the local people were pushing me to say, let's talk about lingana, which is, you know, our wormwood, wilde-els. You must talk about that because of COVID, because it's what we've got to take, its magic. And I said, you must understand that Cyril Ramaphosa watches what I do, because I have a contract with Manancians and everybody's interconnected. So I have to speak the language that the general South Africans want to hear. But if you want more information, you can always call me. And I do believe that moving on from the blackjack, which gets rid of your, brings up the phlegm, that the Lingala, which is the local language for Wilde Als, is actually the way to go. Start with the blackjack, go on to the Wilde Als. If you cannot get the Wilde Als, the good old-fashioned, beautiful, fragrant violet that our parents knew removes phlegm from the body, and you need that in a tea 5 times in the next 5 days to remove it completely, because it dries up phlegm. So, just these common plants that are out there that are great for foraging, great for looking at, the spinaches, the marochs, the self-sustainability that we're going to look ahead at is going to be the most important thing. And bring it in as if it's normal, because we are not living normal lives anymore. There will be shortages of all sorts of things. So if you can get the seeds, and if you can go forward, and if you can access these plants and go and have a good look at them, forage them. I've got the book available on the farm. I can send it to you. You've just got to go under Margaret Roberts. It's so simple. www.margaretroberts.co.za. You'll find our phone number and I'll post it to you. I believe that going forward with seed banks, which I'm putting into schools as much as I possibly can, Linda, we've spoken about it every now and then. When we get a moment, I know we both run. We like ships, passing, not even during the night. I mean, we just passed each other. Life is becoming so fast. We've got to look at seed banks. We've got to go back to educating the schools, because I think that in the future they will become the foundation of our society. If we are desecrating what we have, we will depend more on churches, more on community, and more on schools. So we cannot rely on the medical system. We cannot rely on anything that we've had before from the Western world. We are third world. We love our country. We have beautiful things to look forward to. We have the best temperature in anywhere. We have each other. And I think we've got to go back to roots to get that and live it and be it. I feel so positive about it.
So thank you.
Just going forward.
There is a question from someone, but you answered it yourself around how to get the book. But is it available on Take-A-Lot as well or not? Do you know?
I'm not sure about Take-A-Lot. I can send it to you anywhere in the...
Put your website, put your website details just now into the chat box, because everybody can then get that. And I will be doing a communication to everyone after this, so maybe I can put it in there as well. But yeah, just in pulling it all together between our roots and legacy and nurturing, I think that there are so many ways in which we can help one another in the simplicity of life. So I really appreciate you, Mark, and thank you, Sandy, for sharing with us today. Thank you. So Dean Moore, who is the CEO of Just Retirement Income Specialists. Dean, are you with us? I'd like to hand over to you just to say a few words.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Linda, to you and your 50+ team. I think you're doing amazing work, and just this was such an inspiring session this morning. I really loved hearing all of those stories. The Just South Africa is really proud to support all of your initiatives. And our aim is to help people to rethink retirement and help people plan their finances to enable a better later life. And in all of these stories, there were amazing points of resonance with financial planning. So Niven spoke about, be careful of the mind traps when you face complexity, and how much does that play out when you're thinking about finances in retirement. So don't let those mind traps stop you from doing your appropriate planning. And Nikki, I just love that story of navigating through transitions and managing crises, and what an example of being playful. I just love the concept of letting curiosity be greater than your fear. So can you approach your finances in retirement that way? Think of it as an exciting adventure that you can be curious about rather than a fearful thing to face. And that financial adventure is all about seeking and financing more life in your years. And just the basics, have an anchor, a guaranteed income that covers your essential expenses no matter how long you live. And an annuity is a great product for that. That's we look to provide that certainty for people in their retirement. You don't want to be betting your quality of life on dying early, especially if you're following Sandy's advice, which gives us that ability to return to nature, appreciate nature, and promote great longevity and good quality of life. And then the excess, if you've got a separate pot for your excess, that can be there for covering discretionary spending. With your anchor in place, taking care of your basic needs, it just gives you that greater freedom, and then that creates space to be mindful. And I love Carine's great examples of activities you can do for free when you're living holistically, like walking, like being in nature, and just appreciating that, as well as having some savings which you can then put towards some of those special treats that Carine spoke about, adventures that you could do. So yeah, as you live your life holistically in such an inspiring way, I just encourage you all to make your finances part of that exciting adventure that you're on, and look at the options, and maybe speak through those with your financial advisor to help enable that rethinking retirement and living retirement to the fullest. So thank you very much, Linda, for this really inspiring session, and just is so proud to be associated with you and with your initiatives in this space.
Thank you so much, Dean. Yes, and we're also grateful to you and Michelle for the support over the last 3 years. And thank you again to the 4 speakers, to Sandy and to Niven and to Carine and Nikki. Just absolutely fabulous. I know I'm so lucky to have such fabulous friends. For me, this is a critical time that we stand together as a community. I will send out the recording for everyone. Please put some comments in the chat box. We really would appreciate that from your sessions. Otherwise, we'll have no clue of what wonderful things that were discussed. But other than that, be safe, be warm, and have a fabulous day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Linda. Great session. Thank you.